the DIESOL podcast.
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
Episode 76, The End of the World as We Know It. ChatGPT with Eric H Roth.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 76. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes.
Hey.
Holy moly.
We
made it through the year.
I know. 2022. We're at the end. You're
End
in California.
I am in California. We're on the same time frame and I'm falling asleep. Because I'm not used to being up at this time.
Well,
but happy to be in the hometown.
Yeah. It's nice. Wrapping up the semester, getting done with everything. So I am looking forward to my break.
Are you done grading?
No, I got a little bit of work.
Are you grading essays?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Are you bringing them home? Are they 5-paragraph essays?
Yeah, there are some of those. We got some different things to sort here. So we'll get into these. So all of these questions are coming from a little bit of the background on today's topic. So I think we'll start by
dive right in.
What's that?
We'll dive right in.
Yeah, we will dive right in. We'll start by diving in. Let's jump over. All right, so today's guest we have finally, and this has been a long time coming.
We've been talking about this forever.
Since episode 1, really. Yeah. Eric Roth. So Eric H Roth teaches students the pleasures and perils of academic writing and public speaking. He has taught numerous English and writing courses at USC since 2003. A former journalist and congressional aide, Roth also directed the CES Adult Education Center from 1996 to 1999, and he received his MA in Media Studies from the New School University and his BA in Philosophy from Wabash College. He's taught in Spain, France, and Vietnam, and regularly presents at professional conferences and conventions, TESOL, all the different ones, traveled to over 40 countries, and he also co-authored the Fluency Focused Compelling Conversation series, which I have some relationships with. So Eric, just to point out, whatever it means, since we make zero money on this show, it doesn't matter if we're conflicting interests here, but I have done a little bit of work for Eric and the Chimayo Press books and some things in there. So the latest one I think was Creating Compelling Conversations from 2019. And Eric, you also served on the Fulbright English Teaching Assistant National Selection Committee, amongst other things. So you're you've done everything. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So I just want to say how I met Eric, and it's when I first started working at USC. I was this newbie teacher, and I attended a TESOL conference, and I was thinking, nobody here knows about technology. And I went to this session on using TED Talks in the writing classroom for ESOL students. And lo and behold, this is where I met Eric. And then my office happened to be across from his, and I had no idea. And I kept hearing this voice, and I kept thinking, I know that voice from somewhere. So I trying not to be suspicious, walked around the corner. I was like, oh my gosh. So I had like this starstruck moment. And then it just turned out he was such a supporter of all of the ideas that I had. And so I am so happy that we have you on the show. Okay, now over to Eric.
Oh, thank you. It's a real mutual admiration society. I've appreciated both of your work, and you've created such a valuable podcast here for not only English teachers in the United States, but I think around the world. And last summer, you both attended and presented at the virtual ELT Summit, which was based out of India. And your presentations were, super hits there. And the vast majority of the English teachers there were from India and the surrounding countries. You've really created something fantastic here.
Yeah. Not yet, but yes, that was a great event too. Yeah.
Thank you. And we've been talking about these issues of technology and how we can take advantage of this amazing technology. And sometimes it feels like the English teaching is far behind the technological possibilities. And I think we've all struggled with how to bring some more innovative practices into our classrooms in different environments with different levels of support from administrators and institutions. And I think, it's up to the individual teachers often to find ways to make it lively and dynamic for the students in the class. And, whatever's happening in the field writ large, we have to teach the students who are in front of us in our classes. Yeah. And I think that's really what is so fantastic about this topic today.
Yeah.
Because you can see where this technology can go in so many different directions. But if we just think in terms of audience, context, and purpose of the English students that we work with, and what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and what possibilities we can gain from this technology, I think it'll be useful. I hope that we don't fall into the fear first default. And let me just kind of take a couple of back steps on that. I was one of those people that was very ambivalent about first introducing Turnitin so many moons ago, because the way it was presented to me was this was plagiarism detection. Mm-hmm. And so if it was plagiarism detection, and then all the students were being required to submit their papers automatically, it felt to me like it was guilty until proven innocent. And I just didn't want that spirit in the classroom. And so for a number of years, I was kind of, hesitant in how to do it. And I would only submit it if I had reason to suspect the paper was not clean. But the technology did get better and more advanced and more sophisticated. And then it added, I think a big jump was when they added the ETS features so that they could look at the style rubrics and they could look at the grammar. And then you could have the students submit it not only for similarities, but you could have them submit it so they had a chance to look at how the educational testing service standardized rubrics worked and how and it's not perfect. It's never been perfect. It won't necessarily be perfect. But it was very interesting for students to see that there was something in the sentence that didn't work. And maybe it wasn't a missing article, but there was something in that sentence that didn't work. And of course, the technology is both marvelous and sometimes mysterious, but sometimes it's kind of mindless too. And so it doesn't know whether the cat ate the house or the cat was in the house. There's no distinction there. There's no meaning in it, but it's very good in structure. And so that it really was useful in letting students submit multiple versions until the due date. And I would even say, maybe you made a mistake and you submitted the rough draft. And that was the draft that wasn't clean, it had 87% similarity, But I think that you can take something out of compliance and then make it more creative and more useful and more educational. And I'm hoping that we don't just look at this as, people are going to use it to write emails to professors instead of writing their own emails. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing if it leads to clear communication between the student and the professor. And then we don't have to have back and forth just seeking out clarity about the details.
Well, let's clarify a little bit here too, because I think all of this conversation kind of comes together in one part. So first, I think there might still be many people listening that haven't caught up with the ChatGPT conversation yet, and so I want to step back too for just a second, because when we started talking and doing the show, and well before we started doing this, and part of the reason the three of us, have had such good conversations in the past is because we've always had fun and, opportunities to play with tech in ways to support students and to give them chances to build their own autonomy. But also, I have to say that today, looking at that, it almost feels like those were like trinkets in certain ways. Like it's like, oh, okay, that was like a fun little toy that we played with, right? I'm not trying to discount the learning that students got out of all the things that we've talked about in the past. All of those things are very real. However, it kind of feels like, like watching your child grow up, and then all of a sudden you turn around and one day it's like, whoa, wait a second, what happened to you being the child?
It all just accelerated in the last everything accelerates exponentially.
Well, I mean literally overnight here, like there was the weekend 2 weekends ago, this was announced and came out and just exploded. So before we get too far into the conversation, and today's a little different because we're just chatting through possibilities, right? We're just kind of it's a little bit more of a philosophical show today than it might have been in other times. But ESOL, I'm hoping that you might read this definition that you found of ChatGPT.
Yeah, so ChatGPT is described by realcleareducation.com as a new artificial intelligence tool from OpenAI, as simple to use as a search engine, but can generate almost any text on command in response to a user prompt. And one of the things that has happened is that users have already discovered that it can compose new songs, write essays, take tests, and just a multitude of things. And so that, it's the implications and the what it can do is just, it blows your mind once you start going down the rabbit hole, because it's a rabbit hole. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to pause it there just because I want to read a sample or two of some of the text that it has generated, just so that people who haven't played with it or haven't looked at it all can kind of get a sense, right? So these are kind of silly ones, but I liked these because they capture tone a little bit, and then yeah.
Brent, so ChatGPT is something where a user will go in, they will type something into a text field, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then something will be generated, and you're about to read.
Correct. So they type in a prompt of whatever they're trying to look for, and then it will create something. So these are a couple of fun samples from Ben Zimmer, and they are fun. But the reason I like these ones is because of the tone that they capture, right? Not just that they write an essay well, but that they are able to catch different types of tones and styles of writing. So the first one that he wrote in here was write a history of crosswords in the style of a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read one paragraph out of the middle of it. It said, in December of 1913, Wynne unveiled his latest creation, the word cross puzzle. It was published in the Sunday edition of the New York World, and it quickly became a sensation. But all was not as it seemed. Hidden within the puzzle were subliminal messages designed to brainwash the unsuspecting public. And it kind of keeps on going, right? So you get this and it's like that tone to be able to capture, which is like, and there are these patterns to writing that can keep people's attention. The next one, I'll just share one more of his that he made, and it said, "Tell me about Occam's razor, but get increasingly cranky." And so this one is just amazing. So he said, so it starts off, "Fine, I'll tell you about Occam's razor, but I'm warning you, I'm not happy about it." The next paragraph says, "Occam's razor is a principle in philosophy and science that states that, given a choice between two explanations for a phenomenon, the simpler one is usually the correct one. In other words, when faced with two possible explanations for something, the one that makes the fewest assumptions is most likely to be true. Fairly standard." Now, look at what it goes in the next sentence. "Now, I don't know about you, but I find this whole concept to be ridiculous. Why should we always go with the simplest explanation? Sometimes the truth is more complicated than that. And why do we have to shave off all the unnecessary details like we're trimming a beard? It's just silly if you ask me." And it goes on and it gets more and more. So this is kind of you can go in and make these things right now. Eric, I know that you, before we were chatting, you probably spent a couple of hours just creating your own prompts and playing with things and making it say, or just seeing what it comes up with for its own responses. And so we want to kind of talk about some of those ideas, some of the things that this is coming up with. I do want to point out just very briefly, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well, but there is a linguist professor up in at University of Washington, and she did an interview, and she wanted to make it quite clear that ChatGPT is not AI, it is a language model, and the way that it builds is based on processing the next possible logical step of what would come in the language. So it's not thinking for itself, right? Like they're trying to say, a lot of people are saying it's AI, it's automatically intelligent, and it's not thinking for itself. My concern with the way that she presented that information is, yes, that's true, but what are the consumers, what are the people reading it understanding, right? Because there are two parts to that. So Eric, I know you have some thoughts on this, and I would love to hear what your experiences have been so far.
Well, I first thing I did was I was just kind of puzzled. I've been following AI for a number of years, and I teach with a lot of graduate students in computer science, and we're seeing just a quantum leap in possibilities. Let me start with an example from the former world chess champion, Garry Kasparov, who might have been the first prominent personality to essentially lose his job and title to a computer and this AI. And he talked about how when he was a young man, he knew dozens of phone numbers, but now he doesn't know the phone numbers of his best friends because it's all he's outsourced that to his phone, his smartphone. But it's opened up a lot of other brain space for other things. And he doesn't mind outsourcing phone numbers. The question that we do the similar thing when we do Christmas cards, and a lot of us have our mailing addresses right now on list, and we don't memorize those addresses anymore. But we've gotten used to Google Mail sending us, 3 possible responses in email and choosing one. And I always try to modify it a little bit. So even if I'm just saying thank you, I'll say thank you, Brent, thank you, Michelle. But we've slowly gotten more and more accustomed to this assistance, and Grammarly just kind of took that to another level. And before we were talking about Turnitin, I didn't know what to expect after all the hype, and sometimes the hype far exceeds the reality. So when I started playing around with it, first thing I did was put in request for short essays on topics that my students wrote this semester that I didn't know much about. And I teach at USC, University of Southern California, and I teach mostly graduate students in a variety of different disciplines. And so the pleasure of the class, one of the pleasures of the class, is that we all we're students and we're learning from each other, and people are specialists and you're speaking to non-specialists in the class. So as a traditional writing class, it's a wonderful environment because as you've become more and more of a micro-specialist, you have a chance to describe key definitions and important concepts to us, and the research trends that you're following and why you're interested in those. But it also makes it difficult sometimes to follow. So I would put it what some of the topics from my students. One of them was the status of Ottoman Catholics in the Armenian Catholics in the Ottoman Empire in the 18th and 19th and early 20th century. Something I know nothing about. Student knows a lot about. They're getting a doctorate in it, and put it in. And they give a really nice, cogent response in like 20 seconds. And that's kind of interesting. Likewise, the ability to, I put in one on the Metaverse, and a student from communications program on wants to work for a luxury brand and the new markets and the metaverse. I don't even really know what they mean. And so I put in luxury brands. Can you tell me about the potential for luxury brands in the metaverse? And got in response, and again, like 20 seconds, a very cogent 400-word response. So it is I think it's going to be too tempting for high school students who may be feeling less confidence and less interest in a standard subject to resist the temptation of rushing off to this technology and being it outsourced, just like we outsource phone numbers to our smartphones. I think a lot of high school students who don't see themselves as scholars are going to be very tempted by this. And if we only use a compliance model, then I think we're going to quickly find ourselves overwhelmed and being very frustrated and feel like maybe it's the end of the world. But I don't think that's the only way we can view this. I think we can use it. And what I'd like to talk to both of you about are different ways that we can take our current assignments or create new assignments as English teachers that encourage our students to play and toy around with this new technology. And create stronger essays, stronger research papers, build their curiosity, and become stronger writers and critical thinkers. And I do think that we're going to need to put more focus on asking better questions, more powerful questions, more precise questions, and also asking for higher standards of proof. So just the fact that it's said by someone, well, who says? And we all know the trope of, some say, well, who are these some people? Or they say, who are these they? So we're going to have to really descend into the details and get people to cite their sources and include, I think, more visual, more infographics, and to write commentary and not just show us the graph, but explain the graph in detail.
And also, here's a hint to MLA and APA. You guys need to really update the way that you are asking us to cite information because it is awful. It's been so awful forever, and there's no way, okay, I mean, tangent, but come on, you guys, why can't we just have a hyperlink inside of a Google Doc, to the whatever the source is? Why do I need to write all these other crazy, anyways? So it's going to be, so I agree. All of these parts here are things for us to consider. I want to kind of go into two parts. So I know earlier, Eric, you said, let's not lead with the fear. But I want to lead with the fear.
I mean, it is the end of the world.
Yeah. So that we can end actually.
So you're going to lose your job. Yeah. You're going to lose your job. You'll never get paid, and you'll get to play, but you'll be a peasant playing amazing technology. How's that?
There we go.
And the world itself might literally end too as machines take over.
Have you seen Terminator? Yes. Because this is a predictive movie, as we all know. So
we called it first on DIESOL.
The title says it all. But the reason why I really want to start with that is because I also want to end on the positive note, and I want people to kind of walk away with some opportunities and things. But I think it would be disingenuous for us not to talk about the things that are concerns here and that a lot of people are worried about with all of these as well. So we can get into a few things. I think the very first thing that's showing up for most people, right off the bat.
What I can imagine, many of my colleagues.
What are they saying?
Cheating, plagiarism. Now how are we going to catch them? Now it's going to make my job harder. Well, yes.
It's going to, but here's the thing, the cheating is absolutely, the unmotivated student who doesn't feel inspired has never had a better opportunity to cheat in 10 seconds. If they didn't have the homework ready for the 9 o'clock class, they can start at 8:30. And they will have their paper full of, an original work
with enough time for a latte. I mean,
yeah, you're gonna have time for it. In 20 seconds, they're going to be able to create a paper if they want to do that.
And what's to the new generation, the younger generation, this is just a matter of efficiency. Actually, I mean, for them, it's why should I? If I can get this much quicker, why not? And so I think that just the approach to how we assess writing and what we consider acceptable work has to be reframed completely. I think just revamped. One of the other concerns along those lines is what's going to happen to our 5-paragraph model and formulaic writing. I mean,
yeah. So
that defeats.
Can you I don't know how your program does your assessment right now, but at USC, we have a written test is essentially a 5-paragraph essay model. And many students have been trained on how to write these already for a long time, so that it's already many problems. If you teach and expect formulaic writing already, it is just a short step to let me outsource. If you're training me to sound like a computer, why not have a computer write the essay too?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a response to that and a challenge that we can walk away. I don't think we have to give up on that.
Well, let's grab that in a second, because I think part of this is John Warner, who wrote the book Why They Can't Write, and he's done some other great stuff. He wrote a thread on this too, and he was really talking about this same idea, which he did break down in that book. But he said, a fairly long thread, but I'm just going to pull out one or two of the ideas that I liked, which he said, one of the worst effects of the standardization of writing and writing assessment is that it has destroyed student attitudes towards writing and even school in general. They do not see writing as a vehicle for discovery, learning, and communication, right? And then he kind of goes on from there. But Eric, I'd love to hear what and we can, certainly conversations around the problem with the 5-paragraph essay, but I think this is almost to the point for me where I'm saying, this is disrupting writing, right? So many people are not going to see the need to write when they just say, hey, I can get the idea out here done well, and I don't need to put in the effort into it. Now, we can go in two different directions with that, right? Of course, we can say, well, hey, that's true, and that's the same reason that people play Guitar Hero, right? I feel like I'm a musician, but I'm just tapping a couple buttons, and I'm not really building any skills on this video game, right? On the other hand, ESOL, I think I did several weeks or months ago, one of my picks was this musician thing, which is essentially the same thing, but you are building a skill of playing a real musical instrument while you're playing this video game, right? So I do this, I'm playing guitar, I'm getting these notes, and I'm learning, at my own pace, and I'm stepping away from it and jumping back into it, but I am getting some actual music training and learning as I'm going through this, because I'm personally interested in doing that, right? And so I'm interested in this gap.
So you're saying that the tools like ChatGPT, oh my gosh, I can't think.
ChatGPT.
GPT. I was going to say GTP. GPT. It can be used as a tool to teach you the skill rather than.
I think so. I think that's
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's the conversation that we're going to need to open up in our field as people start to become aware of this, right?
If we discount it, we're only shooting ourselves in the foot,
right?
Because it's going to be that fight that we had with cell phones, that we had with internet, that we had. It's not going away.
Yes,
the more you resist, the bigger the gap. The scarier the gap.
And I'll give an example many of us know. How did Purdue University, which started off as an agricultural university, public land grant, focused mostly on engineering, how did they create the most popular online writing website,
Purdue,
the online writing lab. And they did that because their computer science engineers, as soon as the internet opened up, said, hey, we could take all these worksheets that we have at the Writing Center, make it accessible to everyone in the community. And some people who are off of the community are interested in how to improve their writing too, or go to other universities, and they could have access for free to our materials. Meanwhile, University of Chicago, Harvard University, Georgetown, Ivy League schools, and USC all were like debating set up academic committees, and took 5 years to figure out what the policy should be in terms of showing university-produced materials for their students to the larger internet. And by that time, 5 years later, the footprint had been taken over by Purdue University. So we have a long history of academia moving really very, very slow in almost a medieval bureaucratic manner in response to rapid, almost revolutionary speed technologies. And so they're so often far, far behind. So I think that there are, students are going to pick up on it much faster than administrators are going to approve responses. But as classroom teachers, we can respond as quickly as the students do.
So we're on the front lines of it.
We're on the front.
We're the ones that closest to the writing. The students are the ones doing the writing. We're assessing the writing, and someone up above is the one that's deciding on these tools.
Right.
Or how to approach these tools.
So there are a lot of creative things that we can do. Well, one thing I pitched for the first time explicitly this semester was that I'm willing, using the Kasparov example, I'm willing to outsource my phone numbers, but I'm not willing to outsource my emotions, my thinking, my experiences, my reflections on my experiences to someone else, let alone an anonymous collection of individuals or machines. So, if we can call upon students to look at their own experiences. So I like things like writing bio statements about your own life, because you're the world's leading expert on that. I do want you to recognize that you're contributing to a Google resume, and I want you to combine objective facts while you create soft propaganda for yourself too. I want you to do things like, I like consumer reviews. And I know some people think that you're just teaching people to being consumers and not citizens. There's a whole discussion on that. I would just note that the quality of life in many countries that do not allow consumers, and we've had a few of those experiments in the last 100 years, did not do a very good job of treating them as citizens either. But anyway, with consumer reviews are accessible. So whether it's a restaurant review, or whether it's sharing food recipes, or whether it's writing product reviews, or whether it's writing movie reviews, those are accessible. And I think that we can build in things like tell us your favorite scene, and remind them about their experiences as physical entities and their sensations, not just their experiences, but also their feelings, and reflecting on that. I think that will help. And we can build critical thinking with that framework too. Yeah. So that's one answer, I think, is don't, it's not, you don't have to distrust yourself or discount your experiences. You can be proud enough of your own life and your own experiences to share those. And then we can work on the language, and just, writing more, then the writing will improve. That's what I'd like to do. Yeah. So that they don't feel so quick to jump to some expert says, because there's also the whole myth that the AI generated text is going to be more like, godlike. It's going to be the authoritative answer. It's going to be like the encyclopedia has spoken, but it's through a machine. And sometimes people are very, very deferential to that kind of voice of God narrative. And I think you want to call them back to their own experience as much as possible.
Yeah. So I think
go ahead. Brian.
Please.
No, well, I was going to say, a thought just popped into my head as we're having this conversation. What is this kind of tool going to do for, like, for example, did any of you type in, speak in the voice of, or write in the voice of an immigrant from Europe? Like, what's that going to look like? And who's going to decide what that looks like for the AI? And so now you're talking about writing and having these experiences or be contributions of the students of their own experiences. And writing is an extension of who you are, right? So if you're writing a consumer review, that's your voice. There's some power there to those words. The more we're relying on other tools to do that, the more distant we are and disconnected we are from what that is, because it's no longer really ours. Sorry,
absolutely. No, that's great. I love that, Ishel. And one of the things that's nice about the consumer reviews and the restaurant reviews is that when the first step of that, I have them read like 10 Yelp reviews of other people, and then it introduces slang and they get this sense of different personalities. Then when they write their review, not only do they get the positive feedback from the classmates that they know and the teacher that they know, but they start to get feedback from total strangers. Right. And that's got a lot of a real power of authenticity, that in English, they were able to communicate well enough that they were able to get positive feedback in terms of likes and such things from total strangers.
Yeah.
So I think that's really nice too, and it is kind of putting on different selves and different personalities.
Well, and that's what we've talked about in the past, Eric, too, is these conversations around like, well, why are we having them blog publicly instead of inside of Canvas, right? Why are we having them make a podcast that gets pushed out there instead of just sending a recording and dropping it in Google Drive somewhere? Because when people know that there's an audience, they're more connected to their own work, and they want their quality to be shown there, right? So believe it or not, we're already getting we're already over the halfway mark here, and we're running out of running low on time.
There's just so much.
I know this is the problem. Is it's impossible. We could go on forever to talk about this, and so there are going to be many think pieces coming out on this topic over the next months. But I do want to make sure that we spend some time talking about the pros of and the possibilities that we can come up with more with utilizing and recognizing what this technology does, and not just sticking our head in a hole in the sand and kind of saying, well, I'm just either going to say someone who's using it is cheating, or I'm going to sit there and make them write everything inside of class, and I'm going to watch every word that they write, because then, I mean, what am I getting paid for? To be a proctor the whole time, right? I don't want that either. I mean, I do like in-class writing time, of course, right? But I want to shift this I want to shift this to a conversation of possibilities and ways that we can, again, when we're talking about language acquisition, when we're talking about, students who are studying English for whatever their goals are in life, then how do we say, like, hey, let's recognize that this technology exists? And I am going to say, like, there are parts of me that's very, like, hey, there are parts, we will lose students in the ESL field. There are going to be students who are going to say, I don't need.
We're going to lose teachers. We're going to lose programs.
Yeah, we're going to lose all sorts of things.
But and there may be university English departments are going to lose even more majors.
Humanities.
Business writing programs are going to take a hit because the argument of this is. It's no longer a skill that you need to learn as much as a skill that you can just deploy if it's just a rough draft. Mm-hmm. But if we can see that you need to use critical reason and ask better questions and then verify information and edit and incorporate in part of the research process, then I think we've got a shot. What I'd like to do is incorporate this as a first draft. So sometimes in research projects, I ask students to first look at Wikipedia. And it's a place to start a conversation, not end a conversation. But it does show a certain structure. It does give links, primary links at the bottom. It introduces in a broad overview, and then you can evaluate not just summaries. And we've talked before about how good some of the summary writing software is out there. So we had to add an evaluation element. So I think we've talked before about using an annotated bibliography for research papers and why I like doing that, because you can see the building process. You can see how the paper is constructed. You can reverse engineer their thought process, and you can follow along if you're unfamiliar with the topic, as I'm often unfamiliar with the topic. So I think that this is a wonderful tool for doing that too. And I'm thinking maybe next semester I'll have one assignment where I'll ask them to ask a question and put in the response, and then summarize and evaluate the response as one of their 10 sources for a research paper.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually, Eric, because that's a great way to get it started, is you can take that, right? And then especially if you're getting... in particular, because of your classes, I know that you're able to really work with lots of different specialized content because, because you're working towards what the students already know. But I do love the idea where if you say, hey, you're already an expert on this, what do you think about what this thing is saying, and what would you have changed? What would you have updated? What parts would you have removed, right? And you can ask for even specific numbers, right? What are the two things that you would remove from this? What are three things that you would have added to this if you were able to, make sure that there's an important point inside of here, right? And so with the recognition that the language in here is not AI, but it's pulling from the model, right? And so you're saying it's not a brain in there doing that. It's pulling from a database that is so vast that it feels like a brain. And
it's also biased, by the way. I mean, the thing is, you want to know what the underlying material is.
Right.
And depending on that selection criteria, and we've all read articles on what happens with the AI visual programs.
Oh, yeah.
If you put in different, the different genders and different ages, you get very different responses to your own photos that you're uploading. Same thing with the text. So I think that if they come back, if you put in a question like, how can AI writing software improve U.S. public education? And that's a question I asked. And he gave me 5 answers. And then if you could ask them to find evidence for those 5, or examples, or do you agree, disagree, why, substantiate and engage. Start with it instead of dismissing it. You're also indicating that you are aware of the tool, and so that you're not some dopey, out of touch Luddite who can be fooled because they're going to go do it. And I think that by introducing it in the very beginning, you're indicating that you're certainly going to be checking this. In addition, so I think that there are some real opportunities for this.
Yeah.
Some real opportunities.
Yeah, I really like a lot of those possibilities too here. We are getting close to time, so let's each grab one more thing that we think we can do as a possibility. And I remember, for everyone listening, we're really just barely cracking this conversation open. It is so deep, and there's so many parts. And I know there's people listening right now that are saying, why aren't you talking about this? What about this exception? We don't know everything, right? This is all brand new. And so we're, even though people like us have been talking about these kind of concepts, it doesn't become real until it shows up in front of us, and we're like, oh, this is what it's actually like. So I have been kind of slowly telling people about this stuff over the years, but I didn't expect to wake up one morning and say, oh, wait a second, it's all here right now. I thought it was going to come slowly or in bits and pieces. So, but like I said, we are running a little bit out of time. So, So Eric, you've shown us a couple of things, but let's grab one more way that you think you might use this as you think you see some possibilities with this.
Yeah, I think it highlights that what they can bring to the table is their own experiences, so that it's valid to have more of a first person voice if it's a movie review, if it's a restaurant review, a product review, or other first person kind of writing. And then that same kind of critical thinking where you ask for particular experiences and evaluation 1 to 10 or whatever. Then when you're doing longer research in the third person, then I think we incorporate it in the process itself. And just the focus on asking more concise, clear questions. And if you want to ask a question, you can do it in the style of a cynic or in the style of a particular writer or in a particular era. I think it'll be interesting. So incorporate it, don't hide from it, and teach them to use it, and then the need for editing and revising and improving bold assertions.
All right. Michelle, what's an idea you have?
I'm thinking of in places where it's English for specific purposes, where the students are not going to be responsible for, they're not going to have time to first of all, learn how to write, and time is limited, but they're still going to have to communicate in writing. And this may be in their nursing field, it could be in the military field, and many other areas. But if they're able to take what AI can give them, and now they are able to apply it to a variety, a wide audience, they can learn from it at a much faster pace without having to take time to have lessons. And I think that would be efficient and save money. And I know that English is a business. So if we can get English for specific purpose students to get to their field faster and still communicate effectively, I think that's going to save time. Yeah. And actually, again, like Eric said, if it can communicate clearly, I don't see why not yet.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say one that's just slightly different take on this, which is I'd like to, next semester I'll do this where I'm going to challenge my students to write something by themselves and then put it in and ask ChatGPT to clean up their language, and then have them give me a compare and contrast. What are they seeing between their original version versus ChatGPT's cleaned up version, and what are some of the lessons that they're learning, especially things that they're seeing multiple changes of. So then a student would have to go back and maybe highlight, okay, this is what changed from version 1, this is what changed in version 2, and then they could talk through and discover through looking at that. And so maybe it's not telling them, hey, this is a wrong subject verb agreement, but they could see like this keeps showing up as this weird little thing with S and without an S. So maybe I need to go and figure that thing out. And then it's a self-discovery opportunity.
Look at that, autonomous learning.
Yeah. Instead of another way around to it. And also, by the way, I spend a long time pointing those things out in their papers. Yeah. And so now I can turn that around and say like, hey, you should be using this to figure this out, and showing what you actually understand from these changes. And then it will become a more ingrained and hopefully more permanent learning for them, instead of just clicking the Grammarly suggestion, click yes, 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 yes. And it's like, well, is
or
that
accepting the teacher's suggestions, which is we spend so much time the first introductory essay talking to them about drafts and showing them different drafts and the author's first draft and what Death of a Moth looked like. And so
Can I just add one other thing that I think is really exciting, not from an American education point of view, but a global education point of view, is the possibility of more open education resources. This could make it very possible if you have a team of teachers in a rural community or in a low-income community, and they want to create, they have an idea for a textbook. They could conceivably create that textbook with far less labor and it could be tailored for their particular students. I can imagine some amazing creative options there. Now, it's not good for, by the way, small publishers writ large, probably not good for large publishing industry, but it may be wonderful for a lot of creative educators and for students in being able to get materials that match their life experience and their lived environments. And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're going to have to revisit,
fantastic possibilities there.
We're going to have to revisit this in the following year and see where a couple of months with this takes us, because 1 year, I just don't know where we're going to be.
It's going to be so different. It's going to be
I don't know
so
where we're going to be
different.
in 6 weeks.
Yeah. It's
right.
I've taught the same class for 4 years, and each semester I modify it a little bit, but in the spring of 2023, I have to add new elements to all of my assignments now.
Yeah. Well, this is, we'd love to hear from everyone out there listening, what your thoughts, your experiences with these things are. So hit us
Fears,
up. Yeah.
concerns,
just keep
all of it.
Everything. Cause there's going to be so many, someone had mentioned to me, they said, it's like, it's going to be like going through, the stages of grief, like there's going to be because it's just, it's so different, right? There's so many changes that are coming to things.
Possibilities.
Well, death opens up possibilities too, Eric. As
it's a metamorphosis of writing.
With that, we're gonna jump out.
All right, it is time for our fun finds. And is it time for our fun finds?
Yep.
It is, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
Today, I actually went with tech, and I have an app called MD Clock. And MD Clock is a widget app.
Okay.
So I have like this little cat that pops up next to the time. It's just fun stuff. And then you have, if you like to customize your clocks, there's one where it can remind you to drink water. It can remind you of your daily habits that you want to curb, bad habits or good habits. It's just a fun techie thing. Okay. So
MD
it
Clock.
is a paid app, and there's a free version, but I paid for it because it was so cute. So MD Clock widget app.
Right. Nice. So mine is a snack, Ritz crackers. I'm sure everybody's had Ritz crackers with like a little chocolate spread on top of it. So
no.
Ritz actually made these ones. They're fudge dipped,
oh my gosh.
right? Like they're fudge dipped Ritz crackers, and we found them at, I have to tell you how crazy this is because my wife went crazy for them, and she doesn't even like chocolate, but she's like, okay, let's go find them. And so we started driving all around Costa Mesa to all the different stores, and we couldn't find them anywhere except for at this one Stater Brothers. Anyways, they are a very nice, the chocolate and the salty, and like the combination is quite good, right?
Like a crispiness, like a soft crispy.
Yeah, so we did raid the entire supply at our local Stater Brothers. We walked out with like 6 or 8 boxes of them and took everything off the shelf. So they're all under our Christmas tree if you want them, or you can try and find them online. But Ritz fudge covered crackers. It also says limited edition right on the box, and so we're like, okay, grab as many as we can, and you guys can think about me while I'm eating them. All right, so Eric, do you have a fun find?
Well, I love podcast, and one of them is The Rest is History. We've been following the World Cup, and the World Cup is a chance to learn a little bit more about a lot of different countries around the world and see some exciting games.
So sad to see Croatia fall out, but yes.
Yeah.
I was rooting for them.
So the Rest is History is a podcast hosted by 2 British historians, and they've been taking little-known stories about historic events from all the countries involved in the last round of the World Cup. So that's been really interesting. From Denmark and Spain and Morocco, and it's just I've learned so much.
That's great.
So I recommend it. So like in Argentina, there's a Welsh colony. Who knew there was a Welsh colony in Argentina? Or, in Senegal, there's the door of no return, and kind of a look at some, somber history there. Or in Belgium, they looked at a famous artist, and it's nice. Cool. I think it's interesting. If many of us have had a chance to work and travel around the world, and it's a nice addition. So
I like
that's
that.
it.
Nice.
I'm gonna have to add it to my list. All right. If you're giving us a shout out in any way, tag us on social media. We'll have everything, all the resources in the show notes. We're on Patreon. And for the show notes and other episodes, you can check out. Sorry, Brent.
You're stealing my lines, Michelle. It's the end of the year. Take it over. Run with it.
For the show notes and other episodes, check out diesel.org/76, or you can listen to us at voiceed.ca. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find the show at DieselPod.
Oh, you can find me at ixie_pixie.
You can find me, Brent G. Warner.
All right, we're going crazy we're going stir crazy at the end here, Eric.
You can find me at Compelling Talks.
All right, Eric. Any other places people can find you? You have all these, these wonderful books and all of these resources. We're having a totally different conversation.
The compellingconversations.com. You can find a lot of free sample chapters, and always interested in feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In Tajik, thank you is Ramat. Ramat for tuning in to the Diesel podcast.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Happy New Year. See you in 2023.
AI can do that.